You are listening to the daily homily for Magdala in the Holy Land.
By the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there whom he loved, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his home. The Gospel of the Lord. Yesterday we were contemplating Jesus crucified as triumphant on his cross. Not triumphant in a way of a military general exultant because he beat his enemies, but triumphant in the triumph of love over hatred and sin and selfishness. We find ourselves today in many difficult environments in the family, in our own histories, in business, in the church, in politics. Our culture is very conflicted. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of people have the impression that we're in toxic situations. We even talk about toxic masculinity and toxic femininity and toxic political culture, toxic culture in business circles, and in many other areas. Also, it could even be in the family, which is meant really to be a little paradise, but which is also plagued with all the dysfunctionality of the human heart. And yesterday's reflection focused on how Jesus responds. He detoxes the environment. And we had that reading from John chapter 3 of the conversation with Nicodemus, where Jesus says, "I have come to not to condemn." And already there's a detox. Because how does it help in many environments that are toxic that people come in and condemn? Sometimes such condemnations seem to come in the form of virtue signaling. They come in the form of superiority and don't hear the cries of broken hearts, the cries of messed up childhoods that led people to drugs and to violence and then progressively into high security prisons. And so with the withdrawal from the podium of condemnation, the willingness to come off this place of righteousness to pronounce how bad the others are, and the readiness that Jesus has to sink into the misery of broken humanity and accept all its cruelty, its horrors, and still doesn't condemn. There's something very healing about this. There's something beautiful that God's love that is so strong enters our broken world with such gentleness, such respect for our broken, hurting persons, and he refuses to condemn. And we have the description of his suffering in that first reading today from the letter to the Hebrews. And he offered prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears. to one who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence, which is the opposite to arrogance. Reverence, great respect, deep, profound respect before the Father. And then there's a line that's touching. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And to learn obedience is a very challenging accomplishment for all of us. And clearly the meaning of the letter to the Hebrews is obedience to his Father. But I wonder, the thought just crossed my mind as this word of God was being proclaimed a few moments ago, son though he was. Today we are looking at Mary at the foot of the cross. And she had many experiences of his obedience. It's very tough for parents when they ask a child to do something and the child slams the door and walks away. There are moments of rebellion. And Mary never experienced that from Jesus. She always experienced an obedience that was complete, was a healthy obedience, an obedience filled with love and reverence, an obedience filled with goodness, with true, authentic humility, with a great spirit of knowing that he was obeying the Father when he obeyed Joseph and Mary. When they told him what to, maybe he saw things should be done differently at that moment, but he accepted to obey. And Mary could resonate with his obedience. She must have been astonished because she knew his heart like nobody else. Astonished at the kind of obedience Jesus brought forth in human flesh, in such terrible suffering. And it must have been palpable to her in some measure that he was deeply fulfilling God's will for our redemption through his suffering. There's something in this contemplation of Christ crucified where we need to lower our voice. We need to enter really taking in what's happening at Calvary. We need to take stock of the relationships. Mary Magdalene is there as well. She must be surely very moved, as many of the film representations of the crucifixion portray her. And Mary is always portrayed more together in herself, deeply laden with sorrow. We call her Our Lady of Sorrows. And in a way, filled with reverence before the Father. It was said recently by a man who was the victim of extreme violence against his person, that he had said that the answer to toxic femininity was a relationship with Mary, the mother of Jesus. And maybe it's really here at Calvary that she recognizes him as her son and recognizes also his deep interior obedience. That's the answer to the rebellion when the snake led our first parents in the deceit of thinking that they would benefit from rebelling against God, for not following God's will, which is the core, the original core of every sin. Because when we commit sins, we think we gain something good for us, even though we are deceiving ourselves. And in clear knowledge, in the measure that that's the case, also going against that clear knowledge. This is a very special day when we see a detoxing of evil in this obedience that Jesus brings, and in Mary's participation in his self-giving. She doesn't resist. She says, do whatever he tells you. May it be done unto me according to your word. And she must remember the words of Simeon at Jesus' presentation in the temple, and he said to her, a sword will pierce your own soul too. And I wonder how she carried that with her all her life, and she doesn't have any doubt about its being fulfilled at this moment. It's complete in her heart, in her life, and she is saying yes once again.
Thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Magdala, follow us on YouTube and on Facebook.